Yes, I can see it.
Fabulous. Okay.
Okay, I'll get us started. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the presentation all about the H-1B fiscal year 2023 lottery. This webinar is being recorded and the recording link will be emailed to all attendees. This webinar is provided as an educational service by Alcorn Immigration Law. The information discussed is an overview only and should not be construed as legal advice or advice to take any specific action. Please be sure to consult a knowledgeable professional with assistance with your particular issue. Lastly, please submit any questions you may have using the Q&A function. The questions do get shared publicly, so please do not share any sensitive or personal information, and there is an option to submit your questions anonymously. We will try to get as many as questions as time permits, and it is now my pleasure to introduce to your founding attorney, Sophie Alcorn.
Hi. Thank you so much, Edith. Thank you for everybody joining us here today. It's a pleasure to have you here with us. As Edith mentioned, my name is Sophie Alcorn. I'm the founder of Alcorn Immigration Law. And the mission of Alcorn is to overcome borders, expand opportunity, and connect the world. And we do that by practicing compassionate, cutting edge, and rigorous immigration law in service of the betterment of humanity. Just this morning, I was reflecting on being a law student and the wonderful clinical education I received from some amazing immigration professors. And there's a book that I've forgotten about for probably 15 years, but I just remembered it this morning, and it's called Rebellious Lawyering. And I remember that was very formative for how I formed my approach to lawyering and what I want to achieve here. So we're really excited today to chat with you about all the H-1B options, alternatives. This is going to be jam-packed, and if you can't take notes, that's okay. As Edith mentioned, you will be getting a recording, and we will also be sharing by email to all participants more information so that you can follow up. And I'll just preface this: if you know that your company needs to file H-1Bs in the lottery this year, I'll go into all the details, but the lottery is happening in basically a month. And we have some internal deadlines for accepting new clients. So we're going to be sharing those in more details throughout the webinar, but just know that if you are ready to push go on this, you have your candidates. If you email us within the next 24 hours, we'll be able to provide special pricing. And our last day to accept new cases is actually going to be about a week from now. So just please keep that in mind as we move forward. I love getting your questions, so please put them in the question and answer window. I will do my best to answer them throughout, and I will also be able to reserve time at the end to go through more of them. So a little bit about me. I'm the author of the Dear Sophie column in TechCrunch. That's a weekly immigration advice column where readers write in and ask their immigration questions. I'm a huge proponent of high-skilled immigration to the United States. I believe that every person, regardless of country of birth, should have the chance to live their dreams. I'm a certified specialist in immigration law. My dad was an immigration lawyer. My mom is an immigrant from Germany. And I've been in immigration law environments my whole life. Alcorn Immigration Law is the firm I founded 6 years ago. And we recently were awarded fastest growing immigration law firm in California. So very, very, very exciting things all around. Great to have you here and wonderful to spend time with all of you today. And I see that the questions started coming, so that's fabulous. This is a glimpse of our rapidly growing team. Everybody is incredible and very passionate about immigration. Most of us have a personal immigration story, like myself, child of an immigrant, or some of our team are immigrants themselves, or people who married immigrants. So it's really personal in some way, shape, or form for all of us. And I think because of the depth of caring and personal touch and complex legal strategy in our approach to support all of our clients, we've had extremely high approval rates, low issuances of requests for evidence, and just really proud of the successes we have, especially because the inception of the firm was at the beginning of the prior presidential administration. And, we've all gone through the last 2 years of COVID together. So congratulations to all of us. We are all still standing. And we have a wide and expansive network that we love leveraging to support our clients. We represent many early stage technology companies in AI, blockchain, machine learning, enterprise SaaS, biotech, many, many verticals. We're going to be doing a podcast soon on immigration for the metaverse, which should be interesting, but tracking all of those developments in new virtual worlds that are being created. So fascinating evolutions in technology, and we are powering the world's best and brightest to be able to make those developments come to real life. So we're happy to leverage our network to support all of our clients. Okay, so we're all here to talk about H-1Bs, and this webinar is an hour, and if I can, I'll try to get you out of here early, but there's a lot of information I'm going to cover. So we're going to talk about, if you're new to this, because I know there's several people who have never done immigration before, like why are we even here today? Why did somebody tell me to sign up for this webinar? What's the benefit? So we'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about the basics of H-1Bs and what they are, and we'll be talking about the process throughout the upcoming year and the cyclical, somewhat used to be cyclical nature of H-1Bs, how the whole process works. And if there's time, I'll share a few options. I'll go off script and share a few options of H-1B alternatives if you don't get selected, but there will be another webinar about that after the lottery, so that everybody can get a refresher on those options when the timing is appropriate. So does any of this resonate? I am HR at a company, and we hired somebody on regular OPT and it's going to run out, or STEM OPT, and we really like this person, and we really want to support this team member to stay in the United States long term. Okay, great. You've come to the right place. That is a good reason to consider an H-1B. Or additional scenario, had this phone call yesterday. I have this amazing software engineer, contractor, consultant that I've been working with in Sri Lanka for the last year and a half. And he's developed all of the IP of our tech company. And I really need him in time zone and to be able to work full time. And he needs to be in a safer country. And it would be really expensive for me to train new people on all of the systems that this individual has developed. Or maybe you're a candidate and you are looking for jobs to be able to come and get permission to live and work in the United States. Or maybe you're HR and you're already hiring several foreign nationals. Maybe you've got Canadians, Australians, people from Mexico on your payroll on these country-specific types of non-immigrant visas, and you'd really like to reward them. Immigration can be a benefit for people to retain top talent, and so offering people a path to a green card would be a next step after somebody's been working with you for a while. And it's safer to launch from an H-1B to a green card than it would be from some of these other non-immigrant visa options. Or maybe there's top talent and you just need somebody here now, but they're not quite ready yet for an O1 for extraordinary ability. So we see lots of reasons why people will consider participating in the H-1B lottery. This is a snapshot. You have your own reasons for being here, and I thank you for being here today. So immigration context, super high level. If for those of you who are returning webinar participants, you've heard my explanation. But high level overview, US immigration has temporary status, which we typically call visas, or non-immigrant status. There's lifetime status, which is permanent residence, aka a green card. And then if folks want, they can apply for citizenship one day after they qualify. So the H-1B is a visa. It's non-immigrant status. It's temporary. It's good for usually 3-year increments and up to 6 years total. If you have somebody who you must bring to the United States at some point, and it's more about stability than immediacy, then you could start their green card process for them now and do the H-1B lottery in parallel. As I'm going to talk about more, it is a lottery, so the H-1B selection is not guaranteed. There are backup options. We can get people H-1Bs without the lottery, and sometimes companies that have really high urgency and importance attached to the work authorization of a certain candidate are willing to make that investment. But for most people, the H-1B is a standard path. And if you wanted to, just know that you could get somebody a green card without an H-1B, but it's going to take several more years. Okay, so now let's talk about the student immigration journey, because this is a really common, in law school they call them fact pattern, but in reality, it's just this is a really common journey that human souls take to navigate this process. So there's usually about 1 million international students in the United States at any given time on F1 international student visas. They could be here for high school, but for our purposes, most of the people we're talking about are either bachelor's, master's, or PhD level candidates. And at the end of each of those degree programs, they are eligible for 1 year of OPT whenever they graduate. Before they graduate, some of those folks choose, if their school offers it for their degree program, to do some sort of working internship and possibly get paid. That is a special program. It's called curricular practical training. It's less common. And some people who have majored in a qualifying degree, science, technology, engineering, or math, the STEM fields, they are eligible for an additional 2-year STEM OPT extension. So the hope of most people who are about to graduate and have a job offer, or who are on OPT working or on STEM OPT working, is that every single March, their company is going to put them in this H-1B lottery that's happening right now. And for most companies, the policy is, okay, get your H-1B, and then we'll talk about initiating the green card process. And the green card process for most H-1B candidates who have a bachelor's or master's level of education is typically, we do this perm process, then there's an I-140, then later when your priority date, which is your spot in line, becomes current, when you get to the front of the line, then you can initiate your adjustment of status process. So we have a question from Narer about what is the typical timeline to go from H-1B to a green card. We have lots of Dear Sophie articles posted on our website about EB2 and EB3 green card pathways with PERM. Also a lot of podcasts on our podcast, Immigration Law for Tech Startups. You can subscribe to it on the Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. So we've done a lot of this, but short level answer is, if you're doing a perm, an I-140, and an adjustment of status, and you end up in the categories of being born in India or China, it could take 5, 10, 15, 20 years, most likely post-COVID. And if you were born somewhere else in the world, it probably will take 2 to 4 years if you're living and working in the US on H-1B to go through the green card process. So thank you so much for that question. Okay, and this ties into that, and once again, subject for another webinar, lots of resources on our website. 3 main green card pathways for after you get an H-1B. Company can sponsor you, or you can sponsor yourself based on your achievements. We do a lot of those for brilliant founders and software engineers and business people. Or if you have the good fortune to fall in love with a US citizen and have a good faith marriage, there's always the family marriage-based adjustment of status green card option. Think of 90-day fiance, for example. And then there is a green card lottery every year that's free to participate in. You can usually put your name in Q4 as a candidate yourself. And that's only for certain citizens of certain countries that have low levels of immigration. Okay, so now we're going to dive into H-1B basics. And I really appreciate seeing all the questions in the question and answer panel. That's where I'm going to pull them out of, not the chat window. So thanks for using that as a resource. Okay, so what is this H-1B? Okay, so immigration law is an alphabet soup, but it's just the order of how the law was written. So Section A was the ambassador visas, Section B is the visitor visas, Section C is the crew members who work on ships and airplanes. So et cetera, you get to letter H. That is the people who are doing specialty occupations. So an H-1B is a specialty occupation visa. Typically, you could say it requires three things. It requires a company with money and a job to do. It requires a candidate with the requisite experience and education who is at that professional level. And it requires a job that actually needs a professional level candidate, aka a specialty occupation. So you need all three legs on the three-legged stool for the stool to stand, otherwise it's going to tip over. So we got to make sure we have all three. And then some considerations for early stage companies and founders considering H-1Bs. There is a prevailing wage. It depends on the geographic area where you're working on and your specialty occupation and your level of experience. And your equity may have an effect because this does involve an employer-employee relationship. So there's nuances as we delve in and support people in different scenarios. But high level, sometimes people ask me, but Sophie, I can't compete with Google and Microsoft and all the Indian consulting companies that are sponsoring people for H-1Bs. But the answer is you can. The lottery is random. And every company can sponsor a candidate once. And there's no effect of somebody's country of birth or country of citizenship on the outcome of the H-1B lottery. As I'll discuss later, the only thing that can give you an added chance is if you graduated with a master's degree or a PhD from a US college or university. So you have as much chance as anybody else. Okay, but why is it a lottery? This is because the total numbers are limited by Congress. By law, there are 65,000 regular H-1Bs that are newly available and created by law every year for new candidates to come to the US and start working, plus the additional 20,000 that I mentioned for people with the advanced degrees. Demand is greater than supply. Therefore, there is a lottery. In the past, I think the most recent number last year, there was somewhere around 220,000 petitions for 85,000 spots. I speculate that maybe this year we'll hit 250,000. So that gives a candidate with just a bachelor's degree or who does not fit into this special advanced degree master's cap thing, probably a 20 to 25% chance of being selected, and it gives somebody with an advanced degree maybe a 30% chance of being selected. So it's worth participating if there's somebody who needs to stay in the United States after school, or if you need to bring somebody over. But once again, there are, more complicated, expensive options that you can do if you need to de-risk the situation and if you need somebody to try to get here before October 1st, 2022. But this is as good a shot as any. So for people who qualify, I usually tell them, you might as well take it. So if you're a new company that is engaging in this H-1B process for the first time, you might be wondering, what are your obligations? So here are some of them. These are the biggies. You do have to pay the candidates the higher of the prevailing wage or the actual wage. That's a calculation that our attorneys run as we get into the process. You need to not negatively affect American workers through your hiring of this person. There can't be a strike or a lockout. You need to post a portion of the application. It's called the LCA. You can post it digitally or you can post it physically. Yes, you can get an H-1B for people to work from home. And yes, you can physically post these LCAs in your bathroom or your kitchen as long as it's in a place in the worksite that is available to everybody who is in that physical location. If requested, you have to allow for public examination of these LCA and supporting documents, your public access folder. And if you're a company and you're terminating somebody and they're not getting another job, you need to be willing to cover the candidate's airfare back to their home country. That rarely happens, especially in the Great Resignation. Even if you lay somebody off, the most common thing is that within their 60-day grace period, many candidates are finding a new employer who will sponsor an H-1B transfer for them. Most H-1B recipients in the United States tend to come from India. A large amount historically have also come from China, a greater number from various European countries, but of course, people from Canada, Mexico, various South and Latin American countries, Africa, are all eligible as well. Okay, so in the past, we used to just talk about one lottery. There was H-1B lottery, it was H-1B lottery season. Oh my God, one chance. But now we have a new electronic lottery system that's been in place for the last 2 years. And so you can see that since we implemented this system in 2020, there have been a lot more lotteries. So why? The government is now in this administration excited to have all of the H-1Bs, all of the 85,000 fully used each year. And with the electronic system, they have a much better read on after the initial selection period in April. There's a 90-day window to file the full and complete petition. So they know by June 30th, they scan them all in, and if they only got 50,000 people who actually followed through by June 30th, then they would know that there's 85 or 35,000 H-1Bs still available, and then they would tell more people in the database that they have a new chance starting in July for another 90 days. So they kept doing this successively. They actually did it 4 times in 2021. So end of March, beginning of July, I think September and November. So just keep in mind, if you're not selected by April 1st, you may still have a chance later. The most common jobs we are seeing are mostly software engineering jobs. These account for more than half of H-1Bs issued every year. So you see a lot of software engineers and software developers, systems analysts, various levels of seniority. So these are the most common roles, but truly H-1B, you could get an H-1B for a lawyer, for an accountant, for any type of professional specialty occupation. There's just the most incentive for technology companies that have a need for software engineers to pursue this path to get enough talent. And I think this is in a future slide, but the reason is, there's more than like 1.5 million tech job openings in the United States right now. So the 85,000 H-1Bs are a drop in the bucket compared to that need. And these people who get H-1Bs are typically very, very highly qualified and compensated. I mean, across the US, the national average for compensation the median was $100,000, and 64% of recipients ended up having a master's degree. Now, this data, I believe, includes not only the lottery, but also all of the transfers, amendments, and extensions that may have also been filed. I think this is just fascinating. These are the companies that tend to sponsor the most people in the H-1B lottery, or the ones who get the most new H-1Bs approved, I should say, because the lottery sponsorship numbers are actually significantly higher. There's a lot of consulting companies, and then Amazon, Google, IBM, Microsoft, big tech. But then when we look at the companies that are petitioning the transfer H-1Bs, you can see that Facebook and Apple come into play. So I just thought that was interesting that these companies have different practices as to who they're hiring and sponsoring new H-1Bs versus transfers. So if anybody is getting on you that like, why are you doing H-1Bs if somebody's anti-immigration? Here's some fodder for you. The companies that are the top employers of approved H-1B petitions are also among the fastest growing employers of US workers. So typically what we see is the companies willing to undertake H-1B sponsorship are just growing really fast and need talent from anywhere, or they're early stage and it's critical hires, and probably later they're going to end up creating lots of jobs for Americans as well. And also, Happy Land, H-1B approval ratings really tanked in fiscal year 2018 in the prior administration, but they are actually higher now than they were in the Obama administration. So very, very, very exciting there. Okay, so how do we start preparing? And thank you for the questions, and I'm going to try to save time at the end to go through all these. Oh, here's an easy one. Masters and PhDs from outside the US, you go into the normal category with everybody else. It's just the people who got their masters and PhDs from inside the US get a special extra chance. So thank you for that question. Okay, how do we start preparing? Well, you can work with us. We are accepting new clients for just a little bit longer. I'm so glad you all were able to make it to this webinar today. We had an outstanding number of registrants. It's very exciting. We start our H-1B outreach efforts in November or December to try to give everybody a chance to start at a leisurely pace, but I do understand that this doesn't necessarily become top of mind until right now. So we do represent a lot of tech companies. We are, for a limited time, able to accept more new clients. If you want to work with us, we just handle everything from start to finish. We'll get you registered. We'll figure out if you got selected. We'll be on all the correspondence. We'll do your LCA. We'll tell you how to post it. We'll do the public access folder. We'll file the full petition if you're selected. We'll help with any visa stamping process abroad or activating a change of status, or just we're there for you for the whole process from registration to approval. We're there for you if you know there's changes of employment later. But we have very limited capacity right now to accept new clients, and I would love to be able to help every single person in the world, but we can't. We do have two options. Most companies choose to do just electronic filing to start, and then they switch into full petition mode in Q2 or whenever the candidate is selected. That's what most of our early stage clients retain us for. But sometimes, and I'll talk about this more later, sometimes people want to prepare the full H-1B petition in advance of the lottery. We can do that now to a limited extent. But really the people who would benefit from this the most are the people whose OPT or STEM OPT, their final year of it is expiring shortly after April, and they need to qualify for CAP-GAP. So when I get to the CAP-GAP section, pay attention if you're on your last year of your work permit or your candidate is, and we can talk more about how that works. So in order to work with us, I'm going to ask Edith to put this in the chat window so that everybody has the same information. We can't accept new clients beyond next week, and our preferred pricing for this is only available for the next 24 hours. And if you sign up if you indicate your interest on after the end of work Friday Pacific time, then there's going to be an increased price. So we're offering preferred pricing right now. I just need to make sure that I have capacity of enough attorneys and paralegals to be able to fully support everybody who needs help. So if you think you're going to be registering your candidates, please decide ASAP. And whenever you're ready, if you want us to support you, you need to email us. The subject line is 2023 Lotto. We need your name, your title at the company, the legal name of your company, the legal name of each person you want to put in the lottery, and their email addresses, and then our team will be able to support you and take you through the next steps. So that'll be in the chat window, and I encourage you to do that as soon as possible. But let's talk about what is involved. All right, sorry, take a breath and gather myself. This is all very exciting and information packed. I did a webinar for lawyers earlier this week for the Beverly Hills Bar Association, and I'm in Mountain View in the San Francisco Bay Area, but I'm from Southern California, and I remember driving with my dad from Irvine to Beverly Hills for some fancy lawyer continuing education event with that bar association when I was a baby lawyer, and I did a similar H-1B presentation for them for like, how lawyers can do these and take, best practices. It was just so funny because at the end they were like, wow, H-1Bs are so fun. And so who knew? I'll try to make it fun for you all today too, but H-1Bs can be fun. Okay, so what's involved? So there is this electronic registration system. There's an employer portal, there was an attorney portal. We got to get the companies in, we got to link them to us so we're on board with everything. It's $10 per beneficiary for the government filing fee. Later, if they're selected, there's more fees. I'll talk about that later. So if you want to retain Alcorn through tomorrow, it's $2,000 for our legal services to put each candidate into the lottery. If they're selected, it's $2,950 additional whenever that happens for our legal services to complete and the preparation of the petition and file it. So this is the preferred pricing. It's still $2,000 through for the next 24 hours. But after that, there are going to be expedites. So it'll be 4K down through next week, plus the $2,950 if selected. So please let us know as soon as possible if you need help. We would love to support you. Just wanted you to have all those numbers so you can better make your decisions. Okay, so more important dates. So the portal will open to create new company accounts on February 21st. So that's one of the things we got to get new startups ready for, especially. The USCIS they announced last week the actual dates for the lottery entry process. They call that the initial registration period, and that's where we have to put all of your candidates' names into the lottery. Typically, we've seen that last weekend in March, just prior to April 1st, is whenever they make the electronic lottery selections. Usually it takes a couple days for all the emails to roll out. And then if somebody is selected at that point, the earliest day to file the physical H-1B petition with USCIS would be April 1st. Very important for those CAP-GAP folks whose last year of OPT or STEM OPT is ending. But there is typically a 90-day deadline for all candidates. And the earliest possible start date is going to be October 1st. So keep that in mind as well, please. Okay, so how can you start preparing? Well, obviously you can work with us, but in parallel, you want to get organized. Candidates are getting better and better with cloud storage of having like a Dropbox or Google Drive folder of all their immigration documents. One candidate recently had an email that was something like their first name, immigration2022@gmail.com. And that was just their email address that they were only using for their school immigration, their company immigration, their USCIS notifications, and to keep all of their documents. So if somebody wants to start a company with me to help people organize their documents, that would be great. But just best practices, keep all of your passports, your I-20s if you have them as a student, your DS 2019s if you were as a J1, scans of all the visa pages of your passport, all your I-94 entry documents, any transcripts, educational evaluations, job experience letters, translations, lots of stuff that might be there or not, but just stay organized. And then companies, especially new startups, there's a lot. We will walk you through this because we work with so many early stage companies and have more of this boutique approach. We know that if you're the CEO or COO or people ops person and you're the immigration point person because you're super early stage, like A, you've probably never done this before, and B, you probably want to get out of doing it as fast as possible, and and you're going to onboard that HR or people ops person to handle it in the future. So we'll walk you through, but in general, we need stuff to prove that you have a real company. Recently, there was a company that raised like $11 million for Series A, and it's just sitting in a bank account, and they did an H-1B transfer for their third hire, and the government didn't believe that it was a real company. So just keep in mind that we have to fully document that you're real, operating. They're very concerned about fraud, and startups aren't normal brick and mortar mom and pop businesses. They're weird in a lot of ways. So think about it from like a government bureaucrat situation where most of the H-1Bs that they see are giant tech companies or consulting companies, and then they've been warned to look for fraud. So how do we educate them about the legitimacy of your company? So that's why marketing documents, tax documents, pitch decks, cap table, term sheet, all of that can be super helpful. Okay, so after somebody gets selected, let's say they get selected March 31st. So typically there's that 90-day submission period where we have to complete the preparation of the H-1B and get it filed, received with USCIS by June 30th. And that's when the balance of the investment for our legal services comes in, and that is when the government filing fees will become due. Typically for a small company with a low level of immigrants already on staff, it's about $1,700 for the standard filing fees, and if you want to upgrade to premium processing, that's $2,500. I'll talk more in another slide about who might need to use premium processing. There's a lot that goes into the petition. As a company, especially a new company, you're going to have to get clear with yourselves on what job title you want, what are the job duties, what's the job description, how's this person going to be spending their time, what fields you would accept applicants from to qualify. The more specific we can be on that, the stronger legal arguments we can prepare for you about why this job is a specialty occupation that will qualify for an H-1B approval. Okay, premium processing is currently available. Some years they turn it off. They turned it off in the electronic lottery at the beginning of COVID. But last year it was back on. I anticipate it will stay available because USCIS is hugely backlogged with, I think, 3.5 million cases, and they're almost broke, so they need all the money they can get. So I'm sure they would highly encourage you to use premium processing. It is optional. If you do it, the adjudication time goes from about 6 to 9 months down to about 15 days. But keep in mind, the H-1B isn't going to take effect until October 1st. So it's, talk to us if you want to decide whether to use that or not, if and when it becomes a decision to make whenever you're selected. Okay, now here's the part about timing for recent grads, cap gap, why you might need to prepare a full H-1B petition now. So let me talk about two things. So we work with a lot of people from Stanford. We're down the street. That was my alma mater. Although most colleges and universities are on the semester system, Stanford is on the quarter system. So most students would graduate around June 21st each year. Let's say somebody's going to be graduating with their master's degree in electrical engineering or computer science from Stanford on June 15th. But they have a job offer and the company wants to put them in the lottery now. Can they be in the master's cap? Yes, if they have the master's degree when we file the full petition, if they are selected. So if that person gets selected March 31st and we have the 90-day window, but they're not going to graduate until June 21st, then we have to prepare to not file their completed H-1B until that last week of June, just before the deadline after they've graduated. Now, conversely, cap gap, let's say somebody is on their, so last year I had somebody who got their MBA from Berkeley, And she only was going to get 1 year of OPT because Berkeley's MBA program did not qualify for the STEM OPT extension. Tangent, that may be changing, updates, another webinar, brief thing at the end about that. So the 1 year of regular OPT was going to end on May 15th, and this person was not eligible for STEM OPT. And she got selected on March 31st. And so technically the deadline was June 30th. However, we needed to get everything ready in very short order to file that full and complete H-1B petition before April 15th, the last day of her regular OPT 1 year EAD work permit, so that she could qualify for CAP-GAP, which she did. The result was she was allowed to continue living and working in the United States for that company through to October 1st. We had to add in premium processing to get a decision on her H-1B change of status prior to October 1st, but she did not have her work authorization interrupted, and on October 1st, her status to H-1B automatically kicked in. So that's CAP-GAP. Every student's EAD expiration is a different date, so we need to create a different strategy for each person to make sure we meet all the deadlines. Travel and filing options. People want to travel, but I still don't recommend it. I don't want you getting stuck outside of the country. So we are still recommending that anybody who's inside the US don't take any international trips unless you have to, because we're seeing a lot of stories of people getting stuck outside still. Okay, so option one, I just mentioned this, change of status. That's where we can set up the H-1B to automatically take effect on October 1st, assuming you are maintaining legal status in the US from the date of filing to October 1st, because everything needs to flow from one to another with no gaps. So that's a very, very common thing that most people do. Most people on CAP-GAP would certainly file a change of status. Some people on a TN might file a change of status. Why would you not file a change of status? Well, the alternative is consular processing. That means traveling to a US consulate in another country to go through a visa application process, which has historically involved an interview. That might be waived now, depending on some new guidance. I'll talk about that at the end. But you got to be outside of the United States to go through that process. So this can be good for, how am I going to say this? Okay, so if you're going to do consular processing, there's consequences to travel. Obviously, if you're living and working in a foreign country right now, you have no choice. You can't do a change of status. You have to do consular processing. But sometimes people in the US choose to do consular processing. Those people would typically be students born in India or China who are still enrolled in their F1 or who are at the beginning of their OPT with STEM OPT waiting ahead of them. The reason is to save their H-1B time for whenever their employer is ready to start the green card process, because there are such long green card backlogs for people born in those countries. That's a way to preserve their ability to live and work in the United States and potentially change employers if they need to. So that can be used on a case-by-case basis, but just keep in mind there are consequences to travel. So if we're filing a change of status, but then there's an emergency and you have to leave the country and travel, you're going to lose your change of status. Your H-1B will still be processed, but the petition will be converted into one that requires consular processing. So you would have to go to a visa interview later to activate it. There are also several updates. There are tricky jobs these come and go. Some are based on law, some are based on court cases, some are based on regulatory decisions. Budget analyst is one that was, a judge decided would not be considered a specialty occupation. An HR manager doesn't require a degree in a specific field, so that one can be challenging. There's several on here. We have been able to get people H-1Bs in some of these, but we want to be really, really careful and only pursue it if it's absolutely necessary. Computer programmers are technically possible again. This has gone through a lot of litigation. I would still prefer to file as like a software developer applications rather than a computer programmer if we have a choice. So that's something to chat with our legal team about after we get started. Yes, work from home is possible, but then any candidates have to inform their employers when they're moving houses, and that could require an H-1B amendment or reposting of the labor condition application. Yes, it is possible to have multiple work sites. The wage increases that were threatened at the end of the Trump administration have not taken effect and are on an indefinite hold for now. And if the government wage survey comes back with too high of a prevailing wage, it is possible to get a private wage survey to get other salary data instead. Travel, just pay attention before travel. If you're trying to come into the United States from abroad, there are still certain travel bans. We no longer have this, typically have this national interest exception scheme, but travel is still tricky. You do need to be fully vaccinated, which means 2 doses of an approved vaccine. There are some specific exemptions, but I have not heard of anybody successfully boarding the airplane or entering the US if they are not vaccinated and they're like on H-1B, for example. And you do need to take a COVID test within 24 hours before entry. An antigen test is okay, and it does have to have a negative result, or you need a doctor letter to show you've recovered. There is a lot of breaking news here. We are going to have a whole other webinar on this coming up. So I've asked Edith to put in the chat window the registration link for this upcoming webinar so you can get even more of your immigration information fix. But I will briefly highlight some of it here, and then we're going to turn to your questions. So this is cool for H's. There is the potential that consulates can now waive the in-person interview requirement for certain cases. Every consulate has the discretion to set its own policies and procedures, so whether you can get this depends on your home country and what that consulate is doing, which depends on its staffing levels and levels of COVID and how many backlogged applications they have. So case by case basis, but super cool for a lot of people. Yeah, oh, I was wrong. It's not a backlog of 3.5 million cases with USCIS. It's probably 3.8 or possibly more, 3.8 million case backlog for USCIS as of May of 2021. So yay for the fact that you're all in H-1B land, which allows premium processing, because there's a lot of people with other stuff going on that can't qualify for that yet. They're trying to improve it. This is something about OPT and STEM OPT. So new fields are going to become STEM fields. Social science degrees with research, quantitative research methods can now qualify for STEM, which is amazing. Even like anthrozoology can be STEM, but more analytical degrees, financial analytics, data analytics, super exciting for folks here. And if you don't get selected for the H-1B, it's also easier to get O1s. And Nadia and I are going to do an additional podcast about that. So stay subscribed to our newsletter and you'll get all of those updates. But the biggie, because I know we have a lot of people with PhDs in the STEM fields who are trying to get H-1Bs, and what if you're not selected? Well, now any scholarships you've gotten at the student level of your PhD, that will now count as an internationally or nationally recognized award for O1 purposes. So that's super exciting. If you want to learn how to qualify for an O1, we have a class on our website called Extraordinary Ability Bootcamp, and that will walk you through. Also breaking news, this will also be in the upcoming webinar. The House is considering the America Competes Act, and it would include unlimited visas and green cards for startup founders and unlimited green cards for people with PhDs in the STEM fields. So also super incredible and exciting. This startup stuff is the Like Act, which some of you have heard me talk about. That's the one that I got to help Representative Zoe Lofgren write. I got to take a pass at editing it, and I was so excited when the Forbes article about this last week mentioned that they were unlimited, because I was the person who redlined the cap that had been proposed on the number of founder green cards. So hopefully that can be my legacy to America. Okay, so join us. We would love to support you. I'm going to go through your questions in a minute. So if you're thinking about this, obviously email us, but there's, just be aware, paying the money doesn't automatically do everything magically for you. You're still going to be, have to be engaged with our team to give us the evidence and information we need, fill out our questionnaires, upload documents. There's still things we actually have to do to get everything ready. So be emotionally prepared that this will also take some of your time, and we would love to support you. So I'll leave this up so you can see what to email us about if you have an H-1B that you need to get started. We would love to be able to support you. So instructions for the email are there. And now I'll spend a few minutes answering all of the lovely questions, as many as I can. And if you if you got your fill, that's the main content. And if you want to stick around, I don't have a hard stop, so I'll try to get through all of these questions for everybody. All right, here we go. Does an F1 visa holder need to receive a prevailing wage to start on STEM OPT if applying for an H-1B a year later, or can we pay a prevailing wage after 6 months? Excellent question. STEM OPT has different wage rules than OPT. For STEM, I believe students have to work at least 20 hours a week, and they have to be paid at least minimum wage. There's other requirements like supervision and a training plan and E-Verify. But the H-1B prevailing wage does not kick in until that person is legally in the United States on H-1B status. So if they're consular processing, it doesn't kick in until they leave, get the visa, and come back in on H-1B. And if they're doing a change of status, the prevailing wage does not take effect until October 1st / whenever their H-1B is actually approved. Great question. Thank you, Simon. This one is from Tiago. Can a company be accepted for H-1B visa and after some years be rejected for a green card? I wonder if working for a multinational company like the Big Four is easier to get a green card instead of a small firm. The green card is the main goal. These are all mutually independent decisions. The criteria for an H-1B are very different from the criteria for a green card. If getting a green card is your main goal, do check out our Extraordinary Ability Bootcamp class, because you may be able to qualify to self-petition your green card in either the EB-1A category for extraordinary ability or the EB-2 National Interest Waiver green card category for people with master's or equivalent experience or who are outstanding. So that's a way to de-risk the process. But really, I would say this comes down to company policies about immigration sponsorship, because the more established companies have much stricter policies on who they're going to sponsor and when. And it's not always guaranteed, right? Like Facebook got into some litigation about the perm process, and now there's a bunch of people who were supposed to get their priority dates from India, but they're not able to. So they're going to have to restart from scratch. So bigger isn't always better. Sometimes small companies that are well funded and are highly motivated and are open-minded might be a better bet for sponsorship. What are the H-1B alternatives for people with F1 non-STEM OPT? Okay, so subscribe to our newsletter for this, but the big one besides O1A is a cap exempt H-1B. We do this through a partner organization that's a nonprofit. I don't own it or control it. It's separate. Essentially, the tech company that you want to work for would sponsor you as a global talent fellow for this place. It's called Open Avenues Foundation. If they accept you as a global talent fellow, they will sponsor your H-1B to work for about 5 hours a week, supervising a group of students on work for the tech company. Then, when you're in H-1B status, we can support your main tech company employer to file a second concurrent H-1B for your other 35 hours a week to work directly at the main company. So this has been valuable. You can get an H-1B any time of year. There's no lottery. And yesterday I had a phone call with the guy who he was a staffer in the Senate when they were writing AC 21. And he created this nonprofits affiliated with universities exemption for organizations to not have to go through the H-1B lottery. I was like, does anybody tell you you're their hero? You're a celebrity? And he's like, no. I'm like, well, it's the best of both worlds. You've changed millions of lives and there's no paparazzi chasing you. So I hope to have him on the podcast in Q2. His name is Stuart Anderson. So if you want more on that, I'll ask Edith to include the resources in the email, but I interviewed the director of Open Avenues, Danielle Goldman, on the podcast, and we'd be happy to refer you over there and represent the tech company to do your second concurrent H-1B. How much equity can you get in a startup and still be eligible for H-1B sponsorship? I'm always vague about this in my Dear Sophie TechCrunch columns because there's no bright line rule. In general, if you do nothing, I would suggest that if you have less than 50% equity, then we could make an argument that you qualify with an employer-employee relationship with the company because somebody else would have the authority to offer you the job, supervise your employment, offer you promotions, discipline you, or potentially fire you. But I've seen companies work with their corporate counsel, we work together, and there's like super convoluted things they can do with various types of stock that are preferred or not, and voting rights and control. So that's why I am always vague about that. So it depends on your needs, depends on your role. Happy to consult on that individually. Here's one. I got the H-1B last year, but I didn't send my physical passport at any time. If I want to travel, how do I prove that I have an H-1 when I'm coming back? If I don't have a stamp, I have an approval notice. Is that enough? No, it's not enough. You need to schedule a non-immigrant visa application appointment with the US consulate in your home country and go through the H-1B visa application process. Some people call it stamping. Typically there's an interview, but it might be waived. This is where you show your passport at the consulate like you did when you were a student. And if it gets approved, they place that visa foil into your passport. It allows multiple entries. The only exception is for Canadian citizens. They do not require visas. There are no dumb questions. Thank you for this question. Does the Master's of Science or PhD degree need to be from a US institution? Yeah, if you want to get that second chance at the lottery, it does. But if you got your PhD in Switzerland, fine. You can still be in the regular cohort for H-1Bs. And there's also other options like an O1 to consider. Can the employees be employed as a contractor? Super great question. Super important now since there's so many global PEOs supporting companies with the employment of contractors in other countries. Once the H-1B kicks in and the person's in the US, they need to be a W-2 employee of the US company. They cannot be a 1099 contractor in the US. But if they're back in Bogota working with the other contractors on the company now as a contractor, that's fine. It's just whenever the H-1B kicks in, that is for employees, not contractors. If I'm not selected through the lottery in a given year, can my company sponsor me again the following year? The answer is yes. You can do it as many times as you want. Does one's salary influence whether an H-1B petition is approved? No, it does not. There was speculation a couple years ago that these sorts of changes would come into effect, but they were thrown out through litigation. So salary is not a factor that would affect lottery selection. I was in H-1B and my last extension was denied after spending 5 years and 3 months in that H-1B. Can the old H-1B be activated again, or will I fall into the lottery? I believe the old one can be activated again with a new employer. So, that'd be something we'd be happy to take a look at your documents about and confirm. The employer files for sponsorship, but can you do a private consultation if I want to know the best way to apply for the green card if I have an H-1B now? Yeah, absolutely. So what we will do for that is we'll send you our abilities questionnaire, and that will help us screen you for whether you can qualify for an EB-1A green card self-petition or an EB-2 national interest waiver green card self-petition. And we would be delighted to support you with that. We do all types of tech immigration. For startups, is there a requirement that the company needs to have existed for a minimum amount of time? No, we've gotten H-1Bs approved right after incorporation, creation of the bank account, and funding for people who are the first, within the first 1 to 3 employees. It is possible. Tricky jobs. What about roles within marketing departments such as marketing manager? Yeah, the best thing you could do to help prepare for this is, in advance of talking to our team, prepare a description of the job duties with the percentage breakdown and the required types of degrees that you would consider. And then we'll be happy to have our legal team consider how we can best support you with those classifications. Can a beneficiary apply for an H-1B through multiple totally different companies? Yes. But if one company registers the same person multiple times, all of those entries will be disqualified. I was on OPT and working with a company in New York. However, I couldn't get an H-1B last year. I continued working with them as a freelancer from my home country. They would like to apply for an H-1B this year. Can that be done while I am in my home country? Yes, it can. We will be targeting an October 1st start date. If you can get a visa in time, you would be able to enter up to 10 days before in September. You should probably use premium processing, and depending on your home country, we need to figure out the best way to actually help you get that visa in your passport after the H-1B is selected and approved. Does the H-1B specialty occupation need to have a direct connection to the field of study of my qualifying degree? Although typically it should, there are exceptions. The exceptions are based on experience and education evaluations. So if you studied English, but you had a minor in computer science and you've been working at tech companies in your home country for several years, we can get your transcripts of your CS classes and job experience letters and send that over to a credentialing company, and they can tell us if that education and experience is equivalent to, for example, a bachelor's degree in computer science, if that's what's required for the specific job. Answered the one already about equity. If I'm still waiting for a response from the RFE request, the documents were sent in December, and I want or need to change the job, does it void the process, and do I need to start the whole process over? I am on STEM OPT. I would suggest you see if your current employer would allow you to pay for premium processing to try to get an answer sooner, to bring this to a close, because if you can get your H-1B approved before you transfer, then you don't have to go through the H-1B lottery again. But if you're in some sort of harmful work environment and you just need to get out of there, since you have STEM OPT, you could just quit and you would basically abandon the H-1B, and you'd have to go through the lottery again if you wanted a lottery again. please, like, all of this immigration from a candidate perspective is a tool to unlock your future, but if it's causing you, anguish to your mental and emotional health, like, it's none of this stuff is worth it, in my opinion, if you're suffering. So make the right decision for you holistically. How do you avoid the tricky job titles in the H-1B process? Is it published? No, this is just, we do this day in, day out. We know we're good lawyers. We pay attention to what's going on in the legal circles. So we will vet every specific petition to make sure it's as strong as possible. And we'll counsel our clients on how to deal with those situations. So many amazing questions. Okay, I'm going to do 5 more and we're going to stop. I'm on STEM, which expires this year. If I now enroll in a PhD course, when my employer applies for the H-1B, do I need to provide new PhD I-20s? Does it hamper in any way my H-1B approval? Once the H-1B is approved, can I still continue the PhD? You can go to a PhD program even without being an F1 student if you have a valid type of working visa, but let's say you're on H-1B, you would still need to maintain the terms and conditions of your H-1B. So if it's like a part-time PhD program, you could keep doing it when your H-1B kicks in. And if the I-20s are necessary for you to maintain your F1 status as a bridge to get to the H-1B, then yes, you would have to provide your I-20s to the employer and the company attorney for your immigration process for an H-1B if you're choosing a change of status, but not if you're doing consular processing. I have a STEM degree and my job aligns very closely with my degree. However, my designation is on the list of tricky jobs. What can I do? Okay, so that's like not official. This is just for employers. If you're considering sponsoring people, like, we got to talk extra if it's in those. I don't know enough about you, but if your employer wants to consult with us about your H-1B, we would be happy to give it a look. Can an individual apply for an H-1B on behalf of a company? No, the company petitions for the H-1B on behalf of the individual. There is no self-petition for an H-1B. How do we find the prevailing wage for our role? I'm working at a small scale company with 1 to 10 employees. There's a website. This is the big one, the flcdatacenter.com. They have a search wizard function. It is in the chat window. Use it at your own risk. All of this is subject to legal nuance and interpretation, but you can just do some quick searching to try to get a ballpark. But what the occupation is, what the wage level is, what the geography is, these are all actually complicated legal questions that an attorney needs to confirm the answer with for you. Can an H-1B applicant, the employee, check the status of their H-1B lottery without going through their employer? Typically, no, it's an employer database. What happens if they applied through multiple companies before accepting one offer around March but didn't get selected and then get selected in the second or third selection? Then it's the decision of the company you're not working for about whether they're going to reach out to you and continue to offer you the job and actually complete the petition for you. Can H-1B spouses apply for the EAD? H-1B spouses only qualify for work authorization as a dependent once the H-1B holder reaches certain milestones in the green card process related to the PERM and the I-140. So that typically happens several years into the H-1B. So if your spouse absolutely has to work at the beginning, the H-1B dependent status will not allow that, and you need to consider backup plans like each spouse getting their own H-1B or trying to get another type of non-immigrant status for the working spouse, the primary working spouse, that would allow immediate work authorization for the trailing spouse. We want to keep an employee who's currently in J2 status. If they get selected or approved, will there be a gap before they can start work on their H-1B? Are we allowed to switch them to individual contractor and have them work from their home country, or would that hurt their case? This is something that we should have a consultation about. J program providers are very if somebody gets their J's through a university for a postdoc, those people end up getting like H-1Bs all the time. But if you're a small company and you got the J1, or if the spouse did through a small company, the people may have to go back to their home country and consular process. But if they're back home, it's fine to work as a contractor from back home in the interim, but this is tricky. It requires more details, so that's worthy of an individual consultation. 29 questions answered from the Q&A panel. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for all of the wonderful comments in the chat window. Just a reminder that has that information about how to register in the H-1B lottery. And we forgot the email address, but it is hello@alcorn.law if you need to initiate an H-1B now. Do check out that chat window. It'll also come by email. There's a link to our upcoming webinar on immigration innovations. Exciting updates for STEM startup founders and teams. You can register now. And thank you so much for all of the supportive comments. That's really fabulous and exciting. And there will be, we'll be sharing a link to the recording with everybody by email. So thank you so much. Be well, keep in touch, subscribe to the podcast, subscribe to our newsletter, and just congratulations to you wherever you are on your immigration journey. Exciting times ahead. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your day. This concludes the webinar. Bye-bye.